has the power to move us, challenge us, and make us see the world in a new light. A poet, academic, educator, and visual artist, Sonali's work bridges the personal and universal, offering profound insights into identity, resilience, and the complexities of human relationships.
One can describe you as a hardcore academic, and we have seen from the last two sessions that you had in ALF that you bring this nuanced creative language to abstract sort of questions that usually are talked about in classrooms, especially gender and gender expressions. So I'm wondering if you ever sort of grapple with the fact that the creative endeavor sometimes is very different from the grey literature sort of academic side that the other siloed side that academics have.
Okay. So yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. Very few academicians are also creative writers. I have noticed. I mean, there are many wonderful examples, but most of them are either this or that, or more this or more that. I enjoy actually being in that space that overlaps both. Right. A lot of my writing is actually very informed by the literary theory that I was very influenced by when I was a BA student, an MA student, going up further and also doing further academics, right? So I bring in deconstruction, I bring in feminism into my poetry.
Ma'am, when you were starting with your writing with something that's very complicated and abstract, have you ever grappled with the fact, because we don't have many examples of something that is also academic and also very creative in that way. So did you have someone growing up that you looked up to?
Very interesting. Actually, with a lot of Indian writers, whether you take even Odia writers, I wasn't familiar with them when I was growing up, but now I'm discovering them. So there is Sarala Devi and there are so many others, Madhusudan Dutt and so on, even Bengali writers. They were both literary and academic, and it's just that some of their work got seen and some did not. Like yesterday we were speaking with Javed Akhtar Saab, so of his film lyrics more, but less, let's say, most people don't know of the other poetry he writes. So it's also about the reception. So when I grew up, I will tell you very, very frankly, I didn't come from a household of creative or critical thinkers. We were the engineer, banker kind of family. So I didn't have anyone per se like that. But reading Maya Angelou, reading, a lot of African American women writers, that has helped me a lot. Audre Lorde is one person who does both academics as well as, I would say critical as well as creative thinking very powerfully together.
Ma'am, in a country like India where the emphasis on the hard sciences, what do you say as a person from humanities? What would you give as some sort of a window into someone who's starting with humanities, like your students and someone who's still, given that I'm a creative writer, I sometimes grapple with the fact that there's a person who is doing engineering, they have certain certainties, but with me it's always like a uncharted territory. So what would you say to that?
No, this is a good question, because again, we are still that country where we're pushing most of our young people to think that doing engineering is somehow superior, to doing the humanities. I think we are in what I would call a humanities crisis. So we actually need more creative thinkers. If you look at history altogether, any history anywhere, especially in India, it's the arts. It's poetry, it is sculpture, it is dance, it is oral traditions, of folk tales, stories and so on, that have made culture actually take shape. And they make resistance and everything also happen. So it's so important for students who are doing humanities to recognize that their role is very, very critical to society.
But India is as diverse as one of the most diverse, and here the importance of representation is felt very strongly. In that way, you talked about how means of production should be owned by people who haven't owned them before, but sometimes young people like me who are waiting for better films, better scripts, and there is this lack, so to say, of humanitarian spaces where one can have a discourse or one could be aware, because in a mainstream what happens is that we are less informed or don't have language or awareness to grapple with certain forces that influence us. So in that way, in terms of gender, in terms of or awareness to grapple with certain forces that influence us. So in that way, in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality, in terms of this sweet word called peer pressure, and also while being a student of humanities, how do we have a space within ourselves, because sometimes looking outward can be a bit
outside into the mainstream world and not find yourself represented,
right?
Whether you have a different colored skin or whether you come from a certain community, you know, even as a woman, I would say, even with all my privileges, caste class privileges, women are still marginalized in India. So if I look at mainstream cinema or popular culture, who's writing them? Who's writing the scripts? Do I see myself reflected? Do I see myself reflected in the advertisements where everyone's looking perfect all the time? No. So you're absolutely right. It can be very, very daunting. So where as artists and creative thinkers do we find that space? I think the university space where you are is an extremely critical and important space. For me, all my angst, personal angst, also was given a political and social framework in my growing up in the university, because it gives an understanding that your personal angst is not just that, it is something larger. It is because of lack of representation, it's because your voice is not being heard and so on. So you create that. I always tell my students, create that. Start a journal, create a safe space where you can talk about representation that is not happening. Means of production owning can happen in the university as well. What you're doing right now,
Yes, ma'am.
you know, I want to congratulate you on that. That is exactly that. You are taking, you know, the tools of representation into your own hands. You can take that further. You can take it outside of the university space. Dalit women are taking the camera and telling their own stories. They're saying you can't represent us, which is true. Which is true. So that's what you do.
Right. Given that there's a limited time, I'd like to switch gear and maybe start with a quick round fire question.
Okay.
I would like to know what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you this.
Okay.
A color that is representing your current mood right now.
I would say this, what I'm wearing, you know, orange and peach and red, maybe.
Right. What are you currently reading and enjoying?
Yeah, I'm reading multiple things. I'm reading a beautiful book called Complaint by Sara Ahmed. I really find it exciting. She's one of those feminists. I don't know if you know about Sara Ahmed. She actually resigned from university because sexual harassment complaints were not being taken seriously enough, despite being this huge academic figure. I'm thoroughly enjoying that. I'm also reading the 100 Years War on Palestine. I'm also I'm just beginning to read some, you know, other fiction. So I'm always reading multiple things, but these two books are
Right.
And I must say, poetry by Devotions by Mary Oliver, which I'm absolutely enjoying. Yes.
What's one of your favorite Indian art film?
Indian, you mean art house film?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, yeah. I would have to say maybe Mandi or something by even Shyam Benegal. Let me think, what is my favorite? This is a tough question, but yeah. Bazaar, Mandi, one of those. Salim Langre Pe Matro, I like that also. Jaane Bhi Do Yaro is one of my, I think humor is very important in telling those stories.
I would like to ask you, it's fairly an academic question, a theoretical concept that is fascinating you nowadays.
What I've always been fascinated by is gender theory, and I continue to be fascinated by the resistance to gender theory today. I'm trying to understand, you can see that happening globally, you know, especially in the US and so on. They are afraid of the idea of gender. So I continue to be fascinated with gender theory and also the resistance and the rejection of it. Who is afraid of gender? That's what I'm,
And also, if there's a person or a book or maybe some sort of a discourse that shaped your academic thinking.
Well, I think I would have to say academic thinking. I would definitely say Judith Butler's work. You know, I'm sure you're very familiar with Gender Trouble, but also early on somebody like Virginia Woolf, you know, when A Room of One's Own. So my feminist thinking, I think, deeply influenced by that. I'm also very influenced by some of my professors who were, you know, very pro-student. And I think I would mention Uday Kumar, who is also very well known in his own right as a author and a thinker for Dalit politics and so on. He teaches at JNU. Gautam Chakravarti. So these are professors who also influenced my work, and as an academic, as I said, Judith Butler's primary influence, but from cinema, Lalita Gopalan is someone I really like her work.
Right.
Yeah.
Given that you also profess, and given that there will be young people who might be coming from all across India, what is something that you, obviously maybe indirectly or implicitly, try to do with your teaching to make them have some sort of a confidence in themselves in a way of pursuing education, and let's say in terms of gender, in terms of caste, in terms of sexuality, how do you?
I'll give you, we have lots of classroom discussions where we do this. I'll give you an example. I'm not taking names, but I was teaching at St. Xavier's, the master's program. There was a young girl, for instance, in class who was of the darker skin tone. And she shared, while we were talking about race as well as caste, class and gender intersectionalities, she shared how she was bullied throughout. She said, I feel comfortable enough to say this now. And because we had this discussion about India's obsession with fairness, where does it come from? Brahmanical, reality, and also colonization and how that kind of... So she felt that she had the language to now talk about it, and I think what was very beautiful was the entire class, boys and girls, right? Everybody was so supportive of her. She gave an example as, I used to walk and they would just, students would just, her peers would touch her skin and just try to do this. I want to see, that's as injurious as that. I want to see if this is black coal or is this really your skin color. Right, so we go from the textbook also into their realities, and I've always done that, and I think it is so important, because otherwise, why are we doing something like The Color Purple? Why are we doing, right, Barbara Smith's, towards black feminist politics, if we can't think about what's plaguing Indian students and their lives and so on.
Yes, ma'am. That's very interesting. Well, if your research were a movie, what genre would it be?
My research work was a movie, what genre would it be? Well, I like to take time to think about things very deeply and elaborately, and I do a lot of close reading and a lot of philosophical lens in reading. So I would say something like, what's a slow genre, like a melodrama, but without the, let's say, the heightened emotions. Although emotions and affect is an important part of my...
Sort of like an experimental film, that French...
Yes, an experimental film, radical avant-garde also. But avant-garde films are also very edgy, so I would say a little bit of the Bollywood melodrama, that also, the long form, as well as, like let's say French avant-garde or noir films.
Just the last question. If you suddenly gain a superpower that could help you with your research, what would that superpower be and why?
Superpower that would help me with my research. Maybe how to... I think a fellowship would be great to start with. So how to not have to... So more time. So if I had, time and the financial factor, let's say I didn't have to teach. So if I had the superpower to sort of manage that and to procure money and, just have all the time to do the research, that would be fantastic. But also to be able to know, I would say with more seriousness, also to be able to know what is a safe space for research and what is not. So one can, protect oneself and guard before going in.
Right. It was wonderful talking with you, ma'am.
Wonderful talking to you. Thank you. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.